The Martini. There's not a more famous cocktail than the Martini. It might be the perfect cocktail. It takes dry gin and the botanicals therein, dry vermouth and the overlapping, to some extent, botanicals therein, and bitters originally, and fuses them together. Classically, it's garnished with either an olive or a twist. Now, this cocktail is so amazing that it is the most famous cocktail on the planet. So much so that it has spawned all these other drinks where people say, oh, it's the pineapple hibiscus martini. Well, clearly it's not. It's just something. But you're going to put the word martini on the end so people have an idea that it's served in a glass that's up. Now this phenomenon this is not the first time it's happened. The cocktail was a drink before it got morphed and morphed and morphed. And now we think anything with booze in it that's mixed is a cocktail. Well, there was a cocktail, just like there was a martini. And the original martini was dry gin. If you believe the folks of Plymouth, they'll tell you that they were the original dry gin for the martini. Dry vermouth. Now, the name of the cocktail that we think of as a martini originally was the dry martini cocktail. It was called dry because it used dry vermouth rather than sweet vermouth. Now, that is not the normal parlance we think of when we think of like, oh, I want my martini extra dry. That means like less vermouth. But the original name of the drink is the dry martini cocktail, signifying that it has dry vermouth rather than sweet vermouth. Because this cocktail became such a phenomenon because it fused two ingredients that were previously not on the market, or at least not on the market in volume enough for people to get them, which was a dry style of gin, Plymouth or a London dry, and then this new dry vermouth, this French style of vermouth, with, of course, bitters. Because a cocktail, for at least the first 100 years of its existence, was known that the defining ingredient of a cocktail was bitters. And the defining ingredient of a dry martini cocktail was orange bitters. So that was the drink. It was dry vermouth, dry vermouth, dry gin, orange bitters, and then either an olive, very famous, or a twist of lemon. The ratios get changed over time. There's a good case to make that the original dry martini was more of a 50-50, meaning equal parts dry gin and dry vermouth with orange bitters, and then the garnish. Several times over history, we've tasted and retasted this drink and come up with an idea that closer to 3-to-1 gin to vermouth is kind of the spot. And it's another one of these drinks where you taste, when you know the history of the drink, whether you believe it starts with the Martinez and it goes all the way to these extra dry, wave the bottle over the shaker, wave the bottle of vermouth over the shaker kind of things, so bone dry that it's basically just cold gin. Somewhere on this line, you have to pick, what is my idea of the best dry martini cocktail? Well, clearly what gin you choose is going to make a lot of difference. Whether it's the classic Plymouth or London dry style, or one of the newer styles, like this American dry from the Durham Distillery, which is cucumber infused and really easygoing and a little lower ABV, or a Navy strength. All of these are going to greatly affect the end result cocktail. I prefer something in the 90 proof gin with our house blend of dry vermouth, which I've discussed in previous segments, which is Noilly Prat Extra Dry. We back in a couple of aromatized fortifieds to kind of give it a little more body. I don't use bitters in mine, and I honestly don't use olives either. I love olives. They're great on the side. But for my martini, I prefer a twist. So let's go ahead and make one for you right now. In the Alley 26 Martini, we're going to use dry vermouth, of course, 3/4 of an ounce. And then we're going to use 2 ounces of gin. I like orange bitters in this drink, but I don't like it as much as not orange bitters in this drink, quite frankly. I think it makes it a very different drink than the one I grew up on, and that's the one I prefer, which is more, the citrus of it is a little more lemon forward. And I think the orange bitters, I prefer it without the orange bitters. I'll just say that. Out of the way for you. So we're stirring, we're just, testing the side of the glass to make sure that it's chilly enough. So good. Unlike the Negroni, we're going to stir this a little longer because it's all booze. And we're going to use a goodly proof gin. If you're going to use a modern style of gin that's in the 80 proof, 88 proof range, stir it a little longer. If you're going to use a London Dry that's closer to 94 proof, you got to stir it a little longer. If you're going to use a Navy strength, I would encourage you to stir it yet a little longer. You want to back it down so it's roughly the same proof, because there's a sweet spot, and you'll taste it, where the botanicals really shine, and that's really what you're looking for. There you go. Now, this drink is really famous with an olive, and an olive is delicious. I like olives. I will put them on the side of my martini so I can eat them while I'm drinking my martini. Modernly, people with this vodka martini, they're like, oh, I like a dirty martini. The thing about a dirty martini is dry vermouth is from the south of France. In the south of France, these wines, the base wines, have all of this sea salt character because they're close to the Mediterranean Sea. So you're already adding that in the original dry martini cocktail with a goodly amount of dry vermouth. So over the years, we've taken the gin and turned it to vodka. And then, well, vermouth doesn't actually taste very good with vodka. So you pull the vermouth out, and then you're like, oh, I'm drinking this cold glass of vodka. Something's missing. Maybe something savory like salt. So I'll put some olive brine back in it. Well, I would hypothesize that if you just didn't mess with the original recipe, you wouldn't have to make up for it by adding olive brine or any other nonsense to your martini. If you kept the delicious, well cared for, aromatized fortified wine that is dry vermouth in the original gin martini, it would scratch all of the itches that you need. Here's our channel knife. We're going to go ahead and go right in that lemon to make a twist, and we're aiming, of course, at the glass, as we've talked about on all of these segments. Got a lot of lemon oil right there on the top. One of my favorites, if not my favorite, the martini.